for these sessions as possible going forward. So today we're going over sort of the foundation. It covers stocks, it covers fabrication, specifically chicken, and we're going to basically learn about sort of the building blocks of like classic cuisine. So let's just skip ahead. I want to do a quick kind of 3-4 minute poll on how everyone's feeling. Feel free to just drop it in the chat. I've gotten some feedback so far from a subset of you, but I like to get sort of, this is kind of your time to tell me what's working, what's not working, what would you like to see more of. I've gone pinged a couple of times during the last week about things I can improve on. So I just want to get a sense of how everyone's feeling. I know, Emma, you were saying how you felt overwhelmed, but you caught up now. So learning how you're feeling now. I take all your feedback very seriously. And obviously, if it's perfect and there's no feedback, we can also skip the section too. Nothing? Nobody wants to unmute? Oh, awesome. Yeah, sorry. I'll give you 30 seconds to write. Yes, I will do a better job of communicating the prep list ahead of the sessions. I think one of the things I mentioned is that I'm still kind of building this curriculum as I go. So I can only really scope out like the next week of stuff. So obviously I've done that with week 2, and I'll continue to do that with week 3. Hopefully I'll have a better sense of what we'll do next week, closer to Thursday after we finish lab 4. Rahul was too busy with work. I understand, yeah, people have commitments. I understand most people have full-time jobs. So I've tried to design this in a way that you can sort of take in isolation. So each week is supposed to be compartmentalized. So you could pick up one week without feeling like you're gonna fall behind. Obviously, a lot of the skills that we cover from like an earlier week is gonna carry over. But I'm gonna do a better job of like making sure that you only need to catch up on like 3 sessions at a time. Tiffany, don't worry about it. Honestly, I don't expect most people to break down their own chicken. I want to show you because I think people feel mystified about fabrication in general and proteins, but it's honestly really simple. I'll upload a video demo of that as well, so you can follow on your own time. You're not going to be behind. Nice, thank you, Alice. Yeah, I honestly am surprised by how well Circle has been going so far. I think the community aspect is really important here. I'll cover a little bit about that as we go along. The video demos are helpful. Glad to hear that, Michelle. Yes, great. Thank you for that suggestion, Emma. I will do a little bit better signposting from now to recaps. We'll be beyond those. Ooh, where are you going, John? Pre-session emails. Nice. Nice. Cool. Well, that's it. Thank you for all the feedback. I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. And as always, if you have feedback, please drop it in Circle or just ping me. Some Circle highlights. I think Mike is having a bit of a crisis with shallots, so if someone can help him out. I think he's located in Southern California, LA County. I personally haven't seen this around me or when I was in California. So if anyone knows what's up, please reach out to him. And Ozzy shared a really great recipe on this cornstalk sauce pasta, which is in line with what we're going to cover today when we talk about stocks. And Mike has a specific question about storing diced onions. I don't know if anyone's had their fridge like emit a strong odor from the onions. His cheesecake was ruined. I'm sorry about that, Mike. That does not sound like a pleasant cheesecake.
We still power through.
I think what helps is if you take a Ziploc bag where it's plastic, you wrap it, right? So that creates like an air gap. So hopefully the onions don't do that. But help keep us posted. I would like to know the answer to that question because I feel like a lot of people may run into that problem too. All right, that is not supposed to be there. So I want to take the time to do a quick recap of what we learned last week. I know it was kind of fast-paced and we did a lot of dishes and there was a lot going on. But basically, what I really wanted to impart on you is that, basic knife skills are kind of major key. Continuous development of your knife skills is really the secret ingredient to becoming a better cook. Because that means like from prep to, when you're cooking, that's just going to speed up everything you do, right? Because if you have bad knife skills, that's always going to be a bottleneck for you to cook every day. And things we covered dicing, slicing, chopping, mincing, coring, and of course, like sharpening. I'm sorry I couldn't do it a live demo, but hopefully the demo on the Circle channel helps a bit. And mise en place is really like a mentality. It's a way of life. You always want to be thinking about it, and it takes place before you even decide to cook. So you went over how to organize with a modular no-frills storage / labeling system. Hopefully some of you have started doing that. I know Ozzy has taken it to a whole other level. I'll talk about later. And let your cookware talk to you, specifically going over like how to use your stainless steel pan, right? So we make sure that we want to preheat the pan, and we want to use your oil smoke point to basically tell you how hot the pan is getting. And a good mnemonic I go to is like, you want a hot pan, cold oil. And the last thing is clean state of mind. I always stress this when we're cooking, but you want to stay organized. You want to clean as you go. If you're not using a pan, just wash it quickly. That way, it's less stuff in the sink after the meal. And as they say, messy cook, messy food. So something to keep in mind.
Hey, John.
Yeah.
Real quick.
Yep.
How long Emma has a question. How long did it take you to get fast at knife skills? Like, what's the learning curve on that?
I would definitely start slow and steady, like focus on technique before you get fast. Like the speed is going to come when your form is correct. And so with, chopping things, I always tell people like work on your form with your guiding hand. So making sure that you're having that claw formation and really pressing the knife against your kind of guiding finger. And then naturally, once you have nailed the form, the speed is going to come. And before you know it, you'll be chopping with your eyes closed. And honestly, it's something that you get better at the more you do it, right? So if you're cooking every day, there will be a chance for you to practice. And especially if you're cooking from scratch. So scratch cooking is a good way to get, level up your knife skills because you're always breaking down the same ingredients. I hope that answers your question. And the key takeaways, something I stress with regards to like our mise en place is like, you want to make sure that you're always like cooking once, but you're also preparing for future meals. So I like to say, cook once, eat thrice, or the joy of mising out, how to cook more by prepping less. So when you're actually cooking, you want to be thinking about, if I'm dicing half an onion, I might as well dice the rest and just save the rest for, save the rest and put the rest away and save that for, tomorrow or later this week. Here's kind of a warning. I don't know if Ozzy's here, but I don't mean to throw him under the bus, but I think this is a great example of what I'm talking about. There's a reason why I'm not telling you what to prep in advance, because the system is designed in a way where we can afford to be lazy about it. What happens when you break everything down right after a grocery trip is that you now have ingredients that are going to go bad a lot faster, and you're removing options for you to be a little bit more creative, right? So you can see that there's a container of broken down cauliflower here. If you have like leftover curry and you want to like slather it on a cauliflower steak and you realize you've already broken it down into like these little pieces, then you kind of remove the option, right? So the system is there to create optionality for you at the time when you decide to cook, but it's not there for you to create like more work. In fact, I really hate putting things away after the grocery trip. So I'll do like the mere basics, right? Like making sure I cube my butter, making sure I put my herbs correctly so they last a very long time. But other than that, I basically, with regards to produce, I keep them in the bag, or I, plastic wrap them, because ingredients, they keep longer together whole, right? So with cauliflower, they like to oxidize, so you want to keep it in that whole form, because what happens when you process it is that you expose more of the broken down bits to oxygen, and so they'll go bad faster. And now you have all these mise en place to get rid of, right? So instead of having a cabbage that lasts in your fridge for like a month and you slowly chip away at it, now you have a bunch of shredded cabbage that you have to use within the next like 3-4 days, which is the opposite of what our system should enable us to do. Another key takeaway is that cooking is fundamentally about manipulating water, and hopefully some of the dishes that we did this week speaks a little bit about that. When you're doing it, we used oil and water are sort of the mediums that we use to achieve certain results with ingredients. So with regards to stir frying, we don't want any moisture because we want to cook the eggs at a rapid heat. But with the tomato sauce, we want to reduce it down, right? So we want to make sure there's always water. And that's how you kind of gauge, that's how you kind of achieve the result you want, right? Because without water, the tomato starts cooking and then it goes over sort of the boiling point, at which point it starts to brown. And sort of the corollary there is that, you have to think about, do you want to brown the ingredient or not? And that's kind of the question when you're cooking. We learned a little bit about the Maillard reaction when we're caramelizing the onions. Sometimes you want that to happen, sometimes you don't want that to happen. And with regards to stock, we'll talk a little bit more about that. And the last takeaway is, tasting and seasoning. And I sort of did the cardinal sin in our last session by not doing this exactly. So it's also a reminder for me to pay attention as I'm doing it. Something to note here is that seasoning is not about flavor. Seasoning is literally just the amount of salt and sodium to bring out like the true taste of ingredients. And the good exercise I'd encourage you to try is like slice a piece of like a beefsteak tomato and then sprinkle salt on it and eat it, and compare it to eating a slice without the salt. And that's kind of the difference, right? The tomato starts to taste more like itself. It doesn't taste salty. It just tastes more like itself. So that's what I mean when I mean seasoning. And that's something I'm just going to keep hammering throughout the entire class, because unfortunately, over Zoom, I can't taste your food and tell you to put more salt in it. So that's something you kind of have to develop a sense for yourself. So a little bit of signposting. Where are we? We're in the second week. I've sort of mapped out what we're doing next week, but this week we're going to focus on stocks and sauces. We're going to focus on a little bit of chicken fabrication to continue our knife skills. We're going to introduce the concept of wet and dry brining proteins. And we're going to finally use your oven. We're going to calibrate it. And I'll go over that on Tuesday. And we're also going to do some deep and shallow frying for Thursday's session. So main kind of topic today is stock. I'm sure most of you are familiar with stock, but at its essence, stock is a savory cooking liquid made from bones and vegetables. And it's really the secret ingredient of restaurant food. Why restaurant food tastes good is because they make their own stock. They don't use cubes or powders or anything like that. They make their stock from scratch. And why do we make stock? Simple reason, it's because of flavor, right? You could just as easily, use water as a cooking liquid, but water has no nutrients or flavor, so your food's going to taste really bland. And most of the time when food tastes bland, it's because they don't use good stock to begin with. Stock is actually really simple in its construct. They're just made 4 main components, sometimes just 3. So the first thing is stock is made from bones, mostly. If you're talking about kind of a meat broth or meat stock, certainly you can also use a vegetable stock, in which case you're not using bones. But the bones are what gives the stock body. It's why when you reduce stock down, it creates that saucy texture is because all the connective tissue and the collagen that's in the bones that render down into the stock, and it's collagen breaks down into gelatin, and the gelatin is what gives the sauce body. So when I talk about the body of the stock, it just means that kind of like thick mouthfeel that lingers after you taste it. The second component is meat. Certainly you don't have to include meat at all. And most of the time you don't. It's more of a, when we talk about stock, it's usually more of a bone-based thing. And when we talk about broth, it's more, sometimes you put a whole chicken to make chicken broth. For chicken stock, you actually use mostly just bones. The third one is mirepoix. It's basically aromatic vegetables. Mirepoix is kind of the French definition of what they use. It's meant to describe like the French, the trio of French vegetables that's used in their cooking as a foundation. So which is celery, onions, and carrots. And it's named after a French aristocrat who like decided this was going to be the way French people eat going forward. So they named it mirepoix. The fourth one is herbs and spices. They're aromatics in that they kind of flavor the stock, but you usually add it sort of after the stock is done to bring a little bit more kind of lightness to the stock itself. And when we make stock, we don't add salt. And the reason we don't add salt is because you want the stock itself to remain pure, because you don't know what you're going to do with it yet. And what happens when you add salt to liquid and then you reduce it down is that you're going to have the same amount of salt, but a reduced basically liquid content. So it's going to taste, you're going to risk over seasoning it basically. Obviously when you make soup, feel free to season it. You should season it if you're going to turn your stock into soup, but for the purposes of making sure we have all the options available, we're not going to use salt. So what types of stock are there? There are only two types of stock, and it's pretty straightforward. There's white stock, in which case you want any color in the stock itself, and there's brown stock. And the reason it's brown is because you would usually roast the bones and you would roast the vegetables, and that kind of gives the stock its color. It's usually a lot more concentrated and flavorful. For today's demo and for your home cooking purposes, I would really just make white stock. It's just as tasty without a lot of the legwork that comes with making brown stock. Because with brown stock, you have to roast the bones and you have to kind of deglaze the pan to get the brown bits out. And usually it's a much more kind of arduous affair than the white stock, which is you throw everything in the pot, as I'm going to show you, and then you just simmer it for 2 hours, you know? So there's a bit difference here. There are tons of different kinds of stock in every cuisine, every culture. There's some kind of stock that people use to flavor their foods. We're going to talk a little bit about corn stock. So if you're eating corn in the next couple of days, don't throw away the cobs. Those cobs are filled and packed with corny flavor that you can render down into a stock. And then of course there's dashi, which is kind of the foundational stock used in Japanese cuisine. So if you've had Japanese food, you're most likely tasting like a dashi cooked dish. There's also shrimp stock, and then there's a bunch of aromatics on the bottom left here. That's part of the Chinese master stock, which is used for poaching proteins and also cooking in. And then and then on the bottom right, there's mushroom stock. So, all those stems, when you're breaking down mushrooms, save those stems. And then once you collect like a quart container full, make like 2 quarts of stock with it. And that's going to be super packed with umami. So what are the use cases for stock? There's a ton. You can make stock into broth. You can reduce stock into something like a demi-glace, which is of highly concentrated brown veal stock. You just reduce it down like 4 times and it creates this really intense flavor. You could use it to cook rice. A lot of times when I need to use up stock, I would just cook rice with it, or you can cook oatmeal with it. There's really a ton of use cases, all to sort of show you that you can, if you have good stock on hand, and usually I keep a couple in the freezer, and I use it throughout the month, you can really do everything with it. And that's kind of the key to having great home cooked meals is having great stock. So a little bit before we jump into the demo this week, we're going to break down the whole chicken, and we're going to use all the chicken parts. I'm going to show you how to use each part. And then so on Tuesday, we're going to make a schnitzel with the chicken breast. We're going to learn a little bit about wet and dry brining. And then we're going to make a sauce with the chicken stock, and we're going to roast some corn. So you have that. And if you have any other vegetables that you want to roast, please feel free. This is kind of your invitation to be more creative. And on Thursday, we're going to make a risotto with the chicken stock. And we're also going to make our compound butter with any herbs that we have lying around. So if you have thyme, rosemary, or sage, save those. We're going to make a compound butter with that. And we're going to use that to baste our chicken quarter. So you can either use the thigh or the leg. It's up to you. And then I have some peas frozen. You should always keep frozen peas in your fridge. So we're going to do that, but that's optional.
Hey, John,
so I will go.
Yes. Hey, John.
Yep.
Leftover vegetables, frozen vegetable scraps. Do you want that to go in the stock today?
Give me like 15 minutes after the chicken demo, because we're going to talk about how to use your vegetable scraps. But for sure, yeah, your head's in the right place. So let me switch to the demo. Cool. All right, so for those of you who are following along, I want you to take your chicken out. And you're going to get, you're either going to use your to-go containers or grab a metal bowl, and you're going to set it over a bowl of ice water.
Sorry, John, can you just say that one more time? I didn't hear you. Grab what bowl?
Oh, yeah. So let me show you. So you want some kind of bowl, and you want to set it over a bowl of ice. So I have a bowl of ice under this top bowl. And the reason is you want to be, we're going to talk a little bit about food safety. The temperature danger zone is between 40 to 140 Fahrenheit. So at any point when you're handling, especially when you're handling protein, that's the rate at which, that's the temperature range between which bacteria multiplies the fastest. So that's why you want to always keep your broken down proteins over ice when you're doing this. And you're just going to add a little bit of water. You're going to make an ice bath, basically, similar to what we did for the tomatoes. If you don't want to mess with this part, you can really, once you've broken down, parts of the chicken, you should really just put it back in the fridge. I'm going to use an ice bath here just so I can show you all the parts that we've broken down. I'm going to use gloves for today's demo, but you don't have to. Usually when I fabricate a chicken, I don't, because I feel like gloves give you this false sense of food safety, and then people like touch other things, after they handle a chicken without taking the gloves off, which kind of defeats the purpose of having gloves in the first place. So if you have chicken shears, I would get your chicken shears out. Brittany, if you don't have ice, basically, I would just put the parts back in the fridge. So I'll tell you when you should. I'll tell you when you should put it back in the fridge. Nice, yeah. Alan, which chicken was this? Oh no, I did not kill my chickens for today's demo. This was from Winco. So let's orient ourselves with the chicken. So be sure you know which way is the breast and which way is the back. So you want your basically back facing up, and usually you can tell because there's a spine here. So the head is usually attached to the spine. How I like to break it down, I'm going to show you how we can spatchcock it, but we're not going to spatchcock the chicken today. We're not going to roast it. We're just going to basically do the same process. So you're going to take your chicken shears. If you don't have this, that's totally fine. You can also use your chef's knife. But basically, you're going to take the spinal cord, the spine of the chicken out. And that is going to be your first part that you're going to save for stock. So you can, it's a lot easier to do with the shears, honestly. So you could just kind of trim along the left and the right side of the spine. But if you have a knife, you could totally just, so I'll show you both ways. My chicken is still a little bit frozen on the inside, but it's not too big of a problem. And sometimes you'll have gizzards inside once you break it open. You want to save that because you could totally eat it. And I usually just put it on a small skillet and saute it and eat it over with bread and a little olive oil. But you want to save this, right? And this is the part where you would put it in a small container and put it back in the fridge if you don't have a bowl of ice. Because this stuff goes bad really quickly. So if you don't have a chicken shear, what you're going to do is you're going to lay down the chicken and just stick your knife into it, and then a little bit frozen. What this allows you to do is save kind of the best part of the chicken for stock. And I generally don't roast the whole chicken because I find that to be kind of a waste of ingredients. You end up with breasts that aren't cooked to the exact temperature you want because the thighs need to be a higher temperature. So once you have this goes in your stock bag. And so is this neck area. Now you have, actually, let's remove this. I put this parchment paper down because I don't have a sink in here, but I think it's more messier than I like. So I'm just gonna get another cutting board after this. So once you have the chicken here, you can kind of see where the breasts are. You have the breast facing you. You have a lot of excess fat here, so we're actually just going to cut the fat off. Yeah. So what you're going to do is once you have the definition, you're going to just trim along the side, and you're going to get your quarters and kind of just falls into place. You might see other butchery demos, but I find that for the purposes of breaking down chicken for stock, this is kind of the easiest way to do it because you see all the shapes. You see all the parts of the chicken kind of in front of you already. And then don't be afraid to like just pull. A lot of the times when you just pull, it just kind of naturally gives you.
Hey, John, if we're putting pieces of the chicken into the fridge because we don't have an ice bath, just
Yeah, so the parts are already broken down, right? So if you have a scrap bag for scraps, this is what you would, for stock, this is where you put it. For the gizzards and the liver and the chicken heart, put it in a little cup container, like store it separately.
Okay.
Basically, yeah. Or if you don't want to eat this, you can toss it. That's totally fine. I know some people are squeamish about gizzards in general, so, or awful. And now that you have your leg quarters, you could totally just put this away and label it. So that's what I'm not going to do that because I want to break down the rest. But if you don't have an ice bath, that's what you would do. So take a moment to do that. Put it away as you go. Now you have this nice little top of the chicken. Let me know if you guys need more time.
Should we keep the fat too?
You should definitely keep the fat. So yeah, that's what I was going to talk about next. Any fat that you have, any fat that you take out, like for example, if you're cooking chicken breast and you don't want the skin, save the skin separately. I usually keep a container of chicken skin in the freezer, and once I have enough, I defrost it and I render it down into chicken fat. And once you render it down, the skin actually crisps up and makes these things called like jabreens, I think is what Jewish, is known in Jewish cuisine. And chicken fat is really good to cook with. It has a very chickeny flavor, so I like to use it to add like that kind of chicken flavor to dishes, and even just to sear chicken with. Okay, now when we have the top, we're going to cut off the wingtips. So what you're going to do is go towards where where the elbow is, right here, and then you're going to see kind of this split, right? This cartilage here, and you're just gonna break it. And so now you have these wingtips that are really good for stock because it has a lot of cartilage. It has some meat in there to give it flavor. So you're just gonna put that with your scraps for stock. And you're gonna do it on the other side. So put off the webbing, break the bone a little bit to see where that connection is, where that joint is. And then you're just gonna cut it in half. And then there you go. You have another wingtip. For the breast, put it right side up. And then you're going to feel this kind of breastbone right down the middle. So you're going to cut to the left and the right of it. And that's how you're going to get your breast meat. So I would just split it down the middle. Do a couple of strokes to figure out where that breastbone is. And then you're just going to cut to the left and cut to the right of it. And usually once you've gone an incision, you can just use your fingers to kind of part it. And the breastbone will kind of show itself to you. And you can actually just start peeling it if you don't want to use your knife anymore. It actually just kind of peels off. And what you end up with is you end up with a breast, and you end up with kind of this chicken tenderloin here that kind of separates itself. This is actually the most expensive part of the chicken. You have it right here. I'll put it right here to show you what it looks like. And if you have any like trim, just toss in the stock bag. White meat is actually a good way to flavor your stock. Most of the chickeny flavor actually comes from white meat. And then you're going to do it on the other side. Take out the tenderloin. And I kind of like using my hands because this is just an easier way to make sure you're not, you don't accidentally cut off a piece. We have the tenderloin here. And once you peel off both of the breasts, you have basically the carcass left. This is your first time breaking down chicken. I would love to hear about how you find it. Is it gross? Is it enlightening? Is it cathartic? And definitely use your knife to help kind of separate the meat from the bone.
John, did you take the skin off of the chicken breast? I'm a little behind because I got stuck trying to split some bones.
Oh, I did not.
Okay.
I did not take the skin off, but you're totally welcome to take the skin off if that's how you. Actually, I took the skin off for one. And
I was
saved it
gonna
for
say,
the
'cause
other
mine
one.
looks different. Okay.
Yeah.
And you're using the knife to kind of get that away from the bone and the carcass parts.
Yes. Correct.
Thank you. Sorry. Hard to mute yourself when your hands are covered.
Yeah, don't worry. Feel free to keep yourself unmuted. So once you have the carcass, you just want to take the skin off because you don't want any of the fat in your stock. But I like to keep like the drumstick on because this part is not that easy to eat and it actually gives a lot of flavor to the final stock. So I like to just keep it on there. Some people break it down with the breast itself attached, but I like to just keep it. So your carcass should look like this. You should have a bunch of fat here. And like I said, put it away. And when you have enough chicken fat, just chicken skin, just render it down and you get really nice cooking oil. And you can toss like the fat that like is you know, I call it the bad fat because this stuff actually isn't that great to eat, which is like it kind of looks like goo, like congealed goo. Okay, so now I'm going to put this away. I'm actually going to organize this in a way to show you what goes in the stock and what doesn't. So you have the wingtips, go to the stock, the carcass, you have the spine, you have the neck, and this should be about, I have about like a pound, maybe a pound and a half of chicken bones here, which you can make like 2.5 quarts of really good chicken stock with. So you don't need to accumulate too many chicken bones or carcass. This is, you know, breaking down one chicken is enough to give you at least, you know, 2 to 3 quarts of chicken stock. And then save the white meat, which is the tenderloin and the chicken breast. I'm just going to take the skin off the chicken breast because we're gonna shallow fry in bread the chicken breast for Tuesday. For the chicken thigh, the chicken quarter, I'm going to keep the skin on because we're going to prepare it by pan searing it. So here's what you have. Here's what you should have at the end of your breakdown. And I will leave this here too. So stuff for stock, you have your white meat, you have your dark meat, you have your chicken skin here, and then you have your gizzards, which you can do with it what you like. So now I'm going to put all this stuff away. If you want to get a jump start on your stock, feel free to just put all these, all the stock parts into your pot. because we're not browning them, so they can just go straight into your pot.
Are we using a Dutch oven for the stock?
Yeah, you totally can. I actually recommend it because
Okay.
you're simmering it for at least 2 hours. So
Also, your music turned off, John, in case that was something you wanted to know.
oh, well, you should have told me that half an hour ago.
It was important. I feel like the chicken took precedence over.
No worries. Let me turn that back on.
John, do you think that you could repeat one more time what goes back in the fridge and what goes into the stock?
Yeah, of course. So stock is made from bone mostly and some meat. So the stuff that you should throw in stock is the neck here, the spine that you spatchcocked out, and then the carcass, and also the wingtips. The stuff you should save is the gizzards, like chicken gizzards, and the heart and the liver, and stuff that goes back in the fridge. These are we're going to use for Tuesday and Thursday. So the white meat, try to keep them separate. The white meat, which is the breast and the tenderloins, and then the chicken quarters, so the thigh and the drums.
And the skin you're just putting in a little pine container on the side too?
And I put it in a little container and I freeze it. Because when you render it, what happens is it's a little easier to cut if it's semi-frozen. So I keep it frozen. I thaw it once I fill this cup, I'll thaw it, and then I'll cut it into tiny pieces. I'll put on a little bit of water, and then I'll just cook the fat, render the skin down, and then once you strain it, you get really good chicken fat. And you can use it like any other cooking oil.
Hey, John, we have a question from Dangerfield. What if we don't have the chicken bone / extras? Should we just use chicken meat or just veggies?
If you don't have chicken bone, it's a little hard to make stock. But what happens when you don't have bone is that you end up with no collagen, so no gelatin in the final product. So you're going to end up with a very thin, like mostly vegetable flavored broth. But you can certainly toss a bunch of these meats, simmer it for 2 hours, and you'll get chicken flavor, but you're not going to get that body that you want in the stock. And we'll talk about on Tuesday how to kind of compensate for that. You can use, starch or flour as a thickener to get that kind of mouthfeel, but it's not going to have the same kind of affectation as a really gelatin-rich stock. And that's kind of my issue with most store-bought stocks, and also like bouillon powders and cubes, is that you don't get that nice kind of body, and that's what you're really looking for when you make stock at home. So I'm going to put all these stock parts into the pot, and if you want, just fill it up. I would measure like 2 quarts of water to start, because I know I have about 1.5 to 2 pounds of chicken parts here. But in general, the ratio you look for is like you want 1 quart of water to 1 quart of chicken bits.
All right, John, one more question from Michelle. Do you have a dedicated cutting board for cutting the chicken? I always worry about not cleaning the board well enough, then cutting veggies on it later.
Yes, that's important. I don't. What I do have is I have a plastic cutting board, so I'm happy to throw it in the dishwasher for it to sanitize it for me. And if I hand wash it, what I do is I keep a bleach solution. So I put like a cap of bleach in water and spray down the cutting board after I finish washing it. And bleach evaporates, so I just usually leave it on for good minutes, and it'll sanitize the surface for me. But in restaurants, they usually have cutting boards that they reserve for cutting proteins.
Can you repeat how much water you added?
Yeah, so you're looking at about 1 quart of water to one pound of chicken. So let me show you what's in my pot. So it's not really enough to cover. It's like barely enough to cover. You're gonna add a bunch of vegetables and stuff in it too.
And I didn't really clean, sorry, this is, I didn't like clean off the spine. Is that okay? Like it's
That's fine.
supposed to have everything in it? Okay.
Yeah, that's totally fine. What ends up happening is as you boil it, when you bring it to a boil, all the proteins start to coagulate, and you can just you can skim the scum off after. For those following, how are we doing? Are we all set? Are we ready to move on? It is super easy. Once you have the water and chicken.
Hey, John.
Yeah.
Question. Tiffany says, don't have the chicken right now, but have 2 cobs of corn. Is that fine to start cooking along?
Yeah, I would, for a pound of chicken, I would substitute like maybe 6 cobs of corn if you want like a really corny flavor. And I would just put the cobs in. Not, I would definitely take the kernels off. But yeah, you can replace it exactly with corn. So I'm just replacing the cutting board here. Let me switch the camera. But usually I would make between 4 to 5 quarts of stock every month. Obviously, depending on how much you use, you may want to make more or less. And to speed things up, I actually have an Instapot that I got off Craigslist for like $20. And it helps kind of expedite the stock making process. When you pressure cook chicken stock, you actually can make it in like 30 to 45 minutes, and you don't have to wait around for it to simmer for like 2 hours on the stove. So it saves a lot of time. That's definitely something I would recommend if you find yourself making a lot of stock yourself. So for stock, we're going to work on our mirepoix, and that is, we use 1 onion. So you want to get your mise out. So when you're chopping mirepoix for stock, it's actually really straightforward. We're gonna do what's called a rough chop. Like it really doesn't matter because you're actually not using any of these ingredients in the final dish, so it doesn't really matter how you cut it up. But what I like to do is just get a couple inches, make sure it fits into your stove, into your pot.
Hey,
So that's
John?
what we call a rough chop. Yeah.
Should the chicken be on heat right now? Or is it just sitting in water?
Yeah, you can actually start it. It doesn't really matter because we're not gonna finish the demo right now. You're actually gonna have to continue this simmer it for an hour and a half at least. So yeah, if you want to bring it to a boil right now, totally do that. And I'm going to do that on mine. And while you bring that to a boil, We can work on our knees. Same thing with the carrots. You don't have to peel it. The skin has a lot of flavor, and since you're straining this out at the end, really doesn't matter. So stock is not meant to be fussy. I have here what I call the spices and herbs. You can bunch it up into, and I'll show you. You don't have to do this stuff, but you can bunch it up with cheesecloth, and you have a little satchel. The French call it the bouquet garni. Usually, it's a mix of hard herbs like thyme, parsley, and also if you have garlic cloves, just toss it in the stock pot. I'm actually going to toss everything in the stock pot as I'm doing it.
Did you wash your vegetables first, John?
No, I did not. We're straining it all out, so I usually, if it has visible dirt on it, give it a good rinse. And we are going to talk about your stock scraps. So anything you have left in here, you're going to toss into your pot too. So I have onion skins. I have some onions, scraps, onion ends. If you have leftover parsley stems, we're just going to save that for the end of the stock.
What about the tops of carrots? Can those go in?
The tops of carrots, that's actually a good question. I don't know the answer to. You could totally experiment and tell us how it tastes. The biggest fear I have is like with pepper, it adds a little bit of like an acrid taste afterwards in the stock itself. So, but that's totally a legitimate question. I think you can. I want to say you can. And I also have, this is totally optional. If you want to up the body or the gelatin content of your final stock, I like to add chicken feet. And you can usually find this at Asian supermarkets for like $1 a pound. It's really cheap. And you're just gonna throw it in there too. And that kind of also helps you bring up like the total chicken weight of your stock, which is nice.
Can we add the tomato skins too?
I wouldn't add tomatoes because they tend to color the stock, so you'll end up with a muddier color, but you can totally put tomatoes in it. It's a good source of umami, and it'll help bring up that savoriness of the final stock. But for the purposes of this demo, I'm just going to make a white stock, so tomato will definitely color it, which we don't want. And I also have this onion. I'm going to show you how I would. You really don't need to be precise with this either. You could throw the whole thing in, but we're just gonna do like a big dice, basically. Again, you don't need to be precise. It could just be big chunks. Because this thing is going on the stove for 2 hours, and by the time it's done, everything's going to turn to mush anyway. And obviously, if you find out your ingredients are a little too, not getting submerged, you want to fill up. Most of the time, you want to kind of give it more water until it's covered. And because you're kind of just cooking slowly over a long period of time, you don't have to be like too precise, because at the end, you're gonna get that flavor anyway. Put everything away. And I will show you how to bunch up your herbs all nice. Like I said, this is optional, and usually when I make stock, I do not do this. This is just kind of a nice thing to have. It makes it easier for you to fish out the herbs at the end, but because we strain out everything, it doesn't really matter. So you want to get your bouquet garni ready. Usually, you also have a little bay leaves and peppercorn, and that's what's considered like a classic French bouquet garni. So I'm gonna add some peppercorn. I'm gonna add some bay leaves. And if your bay leaves don't smell too fresh, just add a whole bunch. If you ever want to ascertain for yourself whether bay leaves do anything, I would put a couple leaves in your rice pot the next time you make rice. It makes a lot of difference. And we'll cover the pot. So you want a strip of cotton cloth here. This might be a little small. Cheesecloth, I mean. And you want to unfold that. And you just want to get all your herbs in the center. And you just want to basically form it into like a soup dumpling shape. And what you're going to do is take some rope. I'm just going to tie it up. It's not my best work, but we're not serving this satchel, so it doesn't matter. And what this allows you to do is basically to put it in towards maybe, I would say like the last 30 minutes of the cook. I would put it in. You don't want to put it in the entire duration because these ingredients don't, especially for like parsley, if it gets in there for too long, it's going to turn kind of bitter. You want to extract the parsley and all these herbs at the peak, right? There's a specific time that it needs to be in to extract all the flavor, and then past that point, you hit diminishing returns and you don't want it in there anymore. So usually it's added towards the end. So now you have this nice little satchel to drop in your stock. The stock is going to go, once you bring it to a boil, you're going to lower it to a simmer. And you're just going to keep it at a low simmer for, I would say, at minimum, an hour and a half. Obviously, taste it at the end. If it needs a little bit more flavor, obviously let it go a little longer. And then at that point, you're going to drop in your little satchel bouquet garni. And
If you don't have cheesecloth, can you just drop them in?
excuse me?
If you don't have like a cheesecloth to make the satchel,
Yeah, you can totally drop it in. It's just you're going to have to kind of fish it out after. But honestly, if you drop it in and then at the end strain it all out, you really don't need this. So this is mostly just for if you're making a large pot and you want to like tweak the stock as you go. Maybe you want to take this out and then reduce the stock a little bit more. You can do that.
Are there any herbs that you should not put in a stock?
Anything too overpowering, so maybe like sage, I would say, because sage is really strong, so you don't want to put sage in
Or
there.
like rosemary?
Look, you can put rosemary. I would put a little bit. Rosemary is also a little bit more floral, so it depends on what kind of stock you want to make, right? So we're making chicken stock, so obviously it has to kind of be chicken forward. Otherwise, it'll be like an herb stock, which is totally a thing you can do.
Page somewhere else.
Is chicken just sitting in water now? Oh, yes. Yeah. Good question. But yeah, we're gonna bring it to a boil and simmer it for 2 hours. I like to do 2 hours on the stove. In a pressure cooker, obviously, you can do it 45 minutes to an hour. But yeah, I would love to answer any questions you have now. We're pretty good on time, so we have 15 minutes. I can also
Hey,
let
Jonathan.
you go. Sure.
How many minutes in do you put in the bouquet?
We'll put it towards the end, maybe like the last 30 minutes, I would say.
Thanks.
It's not a hard and fast rule. Obviously, you could totally just put it all in right now and it would still taste great. Still tastes better than the stuff you find, It doesn't make that much of a difference. I can't concretely say, but this is what's kind of accepted as a best practice. But the idea here is that you're making stock that's better than anything you'll find in the store. And it didn't really take that much time, at least active time. And if you find yourself doing this more often, I would definitely invest in an electric cooker. I only use the Instant Pot for stock. That's literally why I keep one around. And there's a ton of cheap ones on the secondary market. You strain the solids and let liquid stock cool before putting in the fridge. I will show you how to, without ice, it's kind of difficult to cool, but I'm going to show you. Let me switch over. If you have a fan, and I hope you do, what you're going to do is, and this is a good segue into another food safety tip, which is you should never put anything steaming into the fridge. You're going to ruin everything in your fridge because your fridge actually is not a chiller. A chiller requires an active fan in it to actively bring the temperature down. So never put anything steaming, never cover anything up that's still hot and put it in the fridge. That's a great way to spoil your entire fridge. Jocelyn, leave those shallots alone. We'll dice it in class together. So you're gonna get your quartz. And another reason I love quartz because they go really well in the fridge, in the freezer. But you're just gonna strain it into quartz. And then if you have ice, you're gonna start an ice bath in this, and then you're just gonna dunk the quartz in like this. And then you're just gonna stir with a spatula. You're just gonna stir the stock, because what that allows you to do is to expose more of the stock to the ice. You want to increase the surface area at which the stock gets in contact with the ice bath. So that's how you rapidly cool it down. If you have a lot of ice in here, it'll take like 20 seconds to cool a quart of hot stock. So that's one way to do it. If you want to cool a huge batch of stock, say you want to put all your stock in this middle bowl, what you can do is to put ice in this and put a lid on it and then just drop it in the stock. And then eventually the ice will melt and you'll bring the temperature of the stock down. Hacky way I like to do it if you don't have a lot of ice is you're just going to set up a fan where my spatula is and you're going to point it towards the surface of the stock. So actually the wick, if you point a fan over it, it's going to wick. It actually works. I thought it was like an urban myth, but blowing on your hot soup actually cools it down. So that's also another trick if you want to cool something down rapidly that's liquid. Any more questions?
There's one from McKay. Do you just toss all the solids at the end?
Yeah. You toss all the solids. If you have a healthy compost pile, I would compost it if there's not too much oil in there. But basically, you've extracted all the goodness out of the stock, so out of all the ingredients. So you can try tasting it. You should totally taste a carrot after it's been, simmering for 2 hours, it's gonna taste like mush. All the carrot flavor is now in the stock itself. But yeah, I'm sorry I can't. I'll try to record this and upload it. I'll upload it how I sort of strain this out. Unfortunately, this is going to go for another 2 hours, so
Hey,
we
John.
obviously don't have that luxury today.
Hey, John.
Tomato skin or scrap, did we toss it in? Oh, you can, but it's going to color the stock. It'll, in exchange, you'll add a lot of umami in your chicken stock. You can totally do it if you don't care about the color. But I wanted to show you guys how you would make like a white stock today. Usually for a brown stock, you would put tomato paste and a little bit of tomato paste and exactly like tomato scraps in, because you want the color to be rich and brown. Cool. That's it for today. I can answer questions for another 10 minutes, or if there isn't any, then we can all enjoy our Sundays.
John, if you don't have ice to do the ice bath, you can just let the stock cool on the counter.
I will not do that because it needs to cool down within 4 hours. So if your stock is still warm after 4 hours, what you can do is you want to decant it first, because in smaller amounts the stock will cool faster. What you can do is put a lid on it and then run it over running water. So that'll basically exchange the heat, and it'll take a little longer, but if you put it under running water, it'll cool itself down.
And you said simmer it for about 2 hours.
I would do 90 minutes. If you're short on time and you want to get on with your Sunday, do 90 minutes and then strain it out. Again, taste it. If it tastes chickeny and full of flavor, then you're done.
Okay.
And once you've cooled it down, I would put whatever you don't intend to use in the freezer. It keeps forever, so you always have stock on hand. We will need 2 quarts, I would say, maybe like 1 quart and a half of stock for this week. So keep that in your fridge. All right, last call for questions. If not,
Wait, Jonathan, I have a question.
Yes. Yes.
It should just be like simmering for these 2 hours, right? Like, so the boil
Yes,
should not be.
you don't want to boil it, because what boiling does is it'll emulsify the fat with the liquid, and it will taste really, your end state stock is going to taste really greasy. So once it comes to a gentle simmer, and I will cover it too, like you can see the stock is kind of simmering. I will cover it too, because it will keep evaporating for the 2 hours it's going to be on the stove. So I'll cover it, bring it down to a low heat, take a peek at it 10 minutes in to see if it's still simmering. You want it at a gentle simmer. But you can see all the proteins start to coagulate. Contrary to popular belief, you actually don't need to skim it all that much, because you're going to strain all this out anyway. And you can see that it's a very clear broth, right? You can actually see through. But once it's starting to be at a simmer, I would just cover it, lower the heat to low, and then, set a timer for 2 hours and do your thing, come back to it. That's it. It is not that hard.
And then chicken feet storage. Can I just put them in a Ziploc in the freezer?
Yes, that is the best way to do it. Usually I buy a case and then I would just, I'm not cooking chicken feet for any other reason, so I would just throw the whole thing in. But yes, freezer is the best place for them.
John, as someone who's never cooked with like the innards of a chicken before, like dessert or anything like that, what should I do with it?
The chicken head?
No, like the innards that they cleaned but left inside the chicken. You said sometimes
you could cook it. You could add it to anything. You could add it to a stew. You could add it to. You could saute it. You could grill it. You could, if you're roasting vegetables for dinner, you could just roast it too. The heart is really good roasted. If you don't like, I don't know how much you like liver, but you could saute the liver in some butter and some herbs, and then that tastes pretty good. A little bit of salt on top.
I'll try that.
Well, if there aren't any more questions, this is where we will sign off. And I look forward to seeing all your stocks at the end posted to Circle. I want to see how they look. And tell me what you think.